All right, I have just a couple minutes after 1:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully everyone can see or can hear me, not see me, but see what's on my screen right now, and is able to hear me. I do ask that you please try to leave your microphone muted as much as possible. That way, I know we have a lot of people in here. It helps to reduce if we have a whole bunch of people talking over themselves or any of that feedback, that horrible screechy noise that sometimes appears. We want to try to limit those things and the distractions in the background and stuff like that. So I'm asking everyone to leave their audio muted. If you have any questions during this, there is a chat feature. It should be at the bottom of the screen. If you'll just click on that chat, ask a question. I have Chris McGilvery on here as well that is keeping an eye out on the chat, and he will either answer your question in your chat, or he will take a moment to bring it up to me so that I can stop and answer it. I'm going to also try to keep an eye on it as well, in case I start to see a whole bunch of the same questions popping in. I can take a minute to answer those as well. So I wanted to welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Krista Favela. If you don't already know me, I know a lot of you already know me, but I wanted to let you know who I am. I'm here. We're going to talk about kind of moving from those remote teaching that you were doing, may have been doing in the spring, and then how does that look when you're transitioning to an online class if you're going to be teaching a fully online class? What is kind of some of those things you need to think about and know about? All right, so I wanted to say thank you to those that were doing it, that were making that transition to those remote teaching. You did great. From our perspective, we really had relatively few major issues that we had come to us, major meltdowns or anything like that. So we want to say thank you for everything that you did do during that spring semester. It seemed to go as well as it could have gone, with all of the extremes that we were kind of thrown at so suddenly. So I wanted to then go into kind of some of the main kind of differences between remote teaching versus teaching an online course. We get some people that every once in a while they say, oh, well, I did this thing for the last 2 months of the spring semester. I taught online. I'm good to go. I'm going to just do the same thing. There's a lot of differences, and so we kind of want to talk about some of those things so that you're aware of them before just jumping full in to a fully online class. So when you're remote teaching, you quite often, a lot of faculty still kept a set time, and kind of place, and being, you could all join synchronously to Zoom, to WebEx, to something, and so you had a set time that you still wanted your students to come and talk with you essentially. Like I said, you often meet via some kind of web conferencing solution, WebEx, Zoom, something of that sort, and content is kind of taught as it's needed. You're able to gauge how students are going, and so you speed up some lectures, you slow down some lectures, you have time to really talk about how is it going, should I spend a little bit more time on this, should I spend a little less time on this, and content is taught, in that setting, in that 1 hour session that you might have twice a week or something like that. We're teaching in an online course, in that truly online environment. Students are expecting that content and that material is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not just that 1 hour time period twice a week. They're expecting to have information for a much longer time that they can then interact with when they're ready. If they want to do it at 2 in the morning because that's when they're awake, they can do that. If they want to do it after their kids are in bed, they have that chance to be able to do it then, and not at 10 o'clock on Monday morning because that's when the professor's available. Students expect to also be able to complete all of their work as they desired. Kind of like I was mentioning, what time is most comfortable for them. So when they come into an online course, they're expecting more availability of when they can do things and not being locked down and tied down to quite so much set times and dates. I've had several faculty that kind of came across this when they moved to remote teaching, that suddenly a student said, well, normally, yes, I would have came and taken my test at 8 a.m. on Monday morning, but I wasn't able to do that. Can I reschedule my test or something like that? Because there's a lot of different things going on. Now they're in the home with their children that they normally put in daycare, or they're at home with their siblings that now their parents are still trying to work, but now they're being asked to babysit them. And so if they are staying in that online environment, they may still have some of those situations going on in the background that doesn't allow them to be able to meet and do things at a real limited set time and place. So they're typically expecting to have a little more freedom as to when they can do tests, when they can submit assignments, when they might have to communicate with the professor or other students. And so the content is being provided more from the beginning. And I'm not talking about like the entire content of the course. I'm talking about whatever's due in this section of material, whether that's a week or 2 weeks or something like that, that they have all of the content available to them from the start of when they're going to have access to it until at least whenever that component is due. And so they're not expecting to get a chunk here and a chunk there like you would in a face-to-face where you get an hour lecture on Monday, an hour lecture on Wednesday, and then the next week an hour lecture on Monday and an hour lecture on Wednesday. They're expecting to get all of that at one time. So if they want to spend 4 hours with it, they could spend 4 hours with it on one day and then not return to it again until the next week. And so it's a little bit different mentality of how students function within a class and how they communicate and deal with all of the stuff that they have to do within a course. So providing the content, you know, a lot of faculty say, well, I can just use the exact same content. Well, absolutely, but there's just some kind of restructuring that we kind of recommend and our best practices, and a lot of times it's adding additional material. So like PowerPoints, what do you tell your students in class? So like even in this PowerPoint right now, how much additional information have I been talking about and saying that wasn't in this PowerPoint that you would lose if I just sent you this PowerPoint? So how are you providing that additional information to your students? Are you doing it by putting it in the notes in the PowerPoints? Are you doing it by creating an additional Word document with all of it? Are you creating a video? What are you doing to provide those additional kind of things? So with videos also, it's different. What we really recommend and best practices are you don't just do a lecture for an hour and stick it out there for your students. Because how hard is it to keep a student engaged in an hour lecture hall when they're sitting in front of you watching you? Now imagine giving them that hour video where now they can go do the dishes, they can go do the laundry, they have their kids, they have their dog, they have all of these other distractions, they have Facebook and not a faculty that's leering at them saying, what are you doing? You have to look at restructuring your videos. Sometimes that means you can actually lessen the amount of information that you provide to a student because you don't have to say the same thing in 5 different ways. You can say it once and then the student has the ability to re-listen to that if they didn't understand that concept. So they can re-listen to the same concept 5 times instead of you having to explain the same concept 5 times. And so sometimes it's looking at your videos and how can you restructure some of those lectures to make it more beneficial to your students and getting the point across to your students. And then written documents, again, what do you tell your students in class? What do you provide to your students? What handouts are you providing to your students in class? And do you have a digital format of that to provide your students and the explanation as to what that is supposed to do and what that's supposed to mean to them? So I want to talk about some examples of different content of online courses, just so you kind of get an idea of some different things and different ways to kind of structure online classes. So hopefully you're now seeing WT Class, it's just kind of a structured course that I have some different examples in here to show. So I'm going to start with this example 1. And so what I typically do, if we were all meeting face-to-face, everyone would be in this course, and I would start by saying, I'm going to ask you, as the professor, asking my students, I need you to complete the first assignment. And so then I would say, go through this module and find the first assignment and complete it. So I'm going to do a little bit of a walkthrough to kind of show some different examples of ways people then would go through this. So clearly I click on module 1 because that's the only way to go. So here's all of my kind of chapters, and then there's a movie review. Well, a lot of faculty see this and go, oh, movie review, there's the first assignment. Actually, the movie review is not the first assignment. It is an assignment, but it's not the first assignment. But when you look in this page, it's not really clear of that. Faculty also often say, well, if I had the syllabus, I would know that there's more than one assignment in this module, and so I would know, well, this might not be the only thing I have to do. That's true, but you also have to think about how many times do students go back to the syllabus after that very first class day, or the very first time for what textbook do I need? Typically we see they go look for the textbooks. What do I have to pay for? Maybe what all kind of do I have to do in the course just to get an overview? And then, oh, I have a problem. I need help with this specific thing. Other than that, they don't tend to go back to the syllabus. So how are students supposed to know what to do? So I'm going to do a little bit of quick of going through all of these. Okay, so going through module chapter 1. Okay, there's some looks like documents, things like that in here. I go to chapter 2 and there's nothing here. Am I missing it? Maybe my first assignment is in here, but I just don't see it because my instructor forgot to make it available. Going on down, so here's chapter 3. Okay, a case study. Oh, okay, a case study. Oh, there's an assignment. So now I have another assignment. But as you saw, whenever I said, I want you to complete the first assignment, neither one of these assignments actually says first assignment. And so even if I come into movie review, notice it just says movie review. So neither one of these say first assignment. So as a student, I might still be thinking, well, did I miss the first assignment? Or, you know, I know that there's 2 that I'm supposed to do. The syllabus, you know, the syllabus says there's 2, but am I really getting the right assignment here? So being clear on all of those different things. Oops. All right. So then I'm going to show you another example. So this is my second example. Basically, this is the exact same information. It's just structured a little bit differently. So we start by seeing, as soon as we come in here, module 1 has a little bit of different information. It starts by telling me, what am I supposed to be doing during this? And so as a student, I know uphand some of the things that I'm going to kind of be looking at and learning by completing this module. So when I open up my module, now I start with kind of an overview. What am I supposed to do? I can see I'm supposed to read these things. I can see I'm supposed to read chapter 2, read chapter 2, listen to a podcast and read the information. Oh, look, complete assignment 1. Okay, right now I know I have 1 assignment right here. And then as I move on down, watch the movie and write a review. Okay, now I know that there's 2 things that I might need to be doing in here. And all of that right there, kind of right there from the start, I can see all of those from the very start, and I'm not having to hunt quite as much through all of the different things to find stuff. And then as I'm moving on down the page, I can see here's those 2 reading things, the articles that were mentioned. I can go into my chapter 3. I can see my audio here. There's assignment 1. It's listed as assignment 1, so I can see that. Movie review, assignment 2. And so it becomes a little bit clear to me, okay, I have 2 assignments in here. Here's the titles of them. Here's kind of where they are. And I can see all of that right here as soon as I enter in this module. So with this, I also want to show you one other perspective of how this module might look. So I have this, what you've been seeing is called a folder structure. You can see it's got the little folder icons, and so it's got folders in here. This second example is a learning module. It's the exact same content, it's just going to look a little bit differently to our students. So when I go in here as a student, I now see there's that first page of text, but I also have a table of contents over here to be able to get me through my different pages on here. I also have a page numbering over here that I can click through to move through each page. Things that are like documents would open automatically as I move on through here. My PDF automatically opens. I see my video, and it takes me 1 page at a time. If anyone's aware of cognitive overload, that's kind of the theory behind using a learning module instead of a folder, is that it chunks content into smaller components so that students are moving through different pages and not having everything all on 1 page. And so that's the basic difference between a learning module and a folder. It is completely up to you as to if you prefer one or the other, just if you decide to use these. Neither one is better than the other. Even in classes I've taught, I incorporate both of them, because depending on how I want it to look will depend on which way may be the better model for my particular content at that particular time. I just like to point out and show that there are different ways of structuring content within this, but it just depends on what you might prefer as to which might be the better way for your class. So I'm going to do one more example in here. And basically the difference between my example 2 and my example 3 is now my example 3 goes above and beyond. Example 2 went through best practices, you know, kind of clearly making it clear as to what my students are supposed to be doing and where to go and stuff like that. Where example 3 now becomes the beautification kind of realm of it. So our module right here looks the exact same. When I go in though, now you'll start to see some additional things. You see that there's a banner up here. I will mention some of these little buttons, the little ally indicator, the little gauges, and this drop-down menu students don't actually see. I just see it because I'm still a faculty member in this class. But you can see there's a module up here, a module banner up here. It goes through, it kind of gives these little folder things to make it a little bit more visually appealing. Instead of having those documents drop down in the bottom, it's actually in line in here, so students know, okay, read the article. Right there's the article for me to be able to read. Read the article. Right there's the article for me to read. And I can go through all of this. It has some highlighted things and some bolded things, so I'm a little bit clear. Oh, complete assignment 1. Write a review. Like I said, it's all this exact same information as example 2. It's just kind of laid out a little bit differently. You can see that it has this kind of banner across here for our assignments as well, and just a little bit bigger pop of some different things inside of this. So I like to always disclaimer, the idea is not necessarily that you want to go full blown the first time you ever teach an online class. You want to go for that example 2, where you're really giving the information that your students need, knowing that someday you want to try to slowly improve upon those courses to get it to look more like that example 3. All right, so let me switch back over real quick to my PowerPoint. And so now thinking back to those 2 examples, example 2 and example 3, how do these examples help your students versus that very first one? How much easier is it for your students to understand what they need to do, where they need to go, how they need to complete things by just restructuring some of that content very simplistically? So from that, faculty start to say, okay, now how do I figure out what to do? So one of the things that we often recommend is looking at a course plan. And this is going to seem really daunting, but what this will really help you do is, in the end, it helps you to shape your course, streamline your ideas, make sure everything has a purpose, make sure that you have good organization in it, good pacing. You don't want to have 5 assignments due one week and then only 1 assignment due the next week. Are you looking at making sure students are doing a good number of information each week, but not overloading them anytime or underwhelming them at some time? Looking at the student experience and how students relate to the content, and are they getting the information that they need? Are they getting perhaps too much or not enough information? And really looking at your learning objectives and outcomes and making sure that you really are hitting those important high-level points that you really need to do. And then it helps you to provide a basic roadmap to follow. When you're starting to gather materials, when you start constructing, you already have an idea of the end and where you're going to end for this course at the very beginning. So what exactly is a course plan? So a course plan is going to cover, you know, what are your topics are you going to cover? Do you have chapters? Do you have units? Do you have modules? What do each one of those components comprise of? What are those different pieces in there? What assessments are you having? What are you having students complete for grades or even self tests of things? Are you doing tests? Are you doing assignments or papers? Do you have group projects in there? Do you have discussions? Do you have requirements for any of those so that they build along the way, or, you know, any checkpoints throughout the way? And do you have methods of collecting that information or checking those different components? When are those topics covered and when are those assessments due? So that students know and you know up front when everything is going on. This is not necessarily the syllabus and that course outline that you put in the syllabus. A lot of these things are the same things and would ultimately go in there, but the course plan is really supposed to be more detailed because it includes, okay, they're going to read this chapter, they're going to read this article. Well, when you go to the syllabus, not all of that is necessarily required. It's more about, okay, I'm covering this kind of broad topic and they're going to have these assignments due. By all means, you can always provide all of this to your students, because if you include all of this, including like objectives and stuff like that, it can really help that student that's struggling with, why am I doing this class? Why am I learning this? Why are you making me do this paper? What is the point of this? And so I'm a big why person. I love to know, why am I doing it? You give me a why and I will follow you to the moon and back. But if you just tell me we're going to the moon just because, I have a lot harder thinking, well, don't you know that you're going to get out there, and how are you going to breathe? And I start thinking of all these reasons why maybe it's not such a good idea. But just having that why behind it helps a lot of those students to know, why am I doing this? And helps them to understand that process behind it. So here's an example of a course plan. This is a pretty detailed one. You can go from anywhere from this detailed to less detailed to more detailed. But I just wanted to give kind of an example so that you kind of have an idea of what does this really kind of look like. Like I said, it looks similar to what you see in the syllabus, but not necessarily everything in this would have to go into the syllabus. So you can see it talks about the unit, what weeks it's going to be available, or be for when students would be doing it, what are the topics, what are the learning objectives that are related to it, what is required of students to watch and do, what is optional to give students additional information if they're having a hard time understanding something, what assignments are they supposed to be completing, different assessments are they supposed to do, and then due dates. In this example, they actually split out the discussion board that they're supposed to post by a certain date and then reply to their classmates on a different date. And so they actually have all of those different due dates sorted out in here for the students, or for the faculty member to start with, for knowing when exactly and what exactly is supposed to be due when. Again, it helps them be able to look at this and say, okay, well, in the first week, they have 2 things due. In the second week, they have 3 weeks due, but you might get to a week and it's like, oh, well, I'm requiring them to do these discussion boards and an assignment and a test and a paper. Oh, that's a lot of things that are due all in 1 week. Maybe I need to split some of these things and reorganize some of these areas. So here's just kind of an idea of different things that you can always put in there. Your start date, when do students actually get access to things? Going along with that, a lot of faculty ask, what is kind of the best practices for how much content should be available at any time? What I generally recommend is giving no more than 3 units, modules of information at one time. Essentially, you give what was past due. So if you have somebody that's running a little bit late, it's still available to them. You don't have to make special exceptions to get them back in. What's currently due, and then what's coming up. That way, if a student wants to work a week ahead, they have that ability to work a week ahead. Maybe they know they have their kid's birthday party coming up next week, and so they're going to be busy trying to get ready for that and preparing for that. Well, I can do all my work for this week and next week, this week, knowing that next week I'm not going to have as much time to get it done. And so giving that extra early access helps to get people to make sure that they're not doing poorly on something because they don't really have the time to invest in it, or they just miss out on something because they get overwhelmed with everything going on. But that doesn't mean you have to follow that. I know some faculty that do 1 week at a time. This is what you're going to do this week, and that's it. I know some people that every time a new unit opens, the previous modules stay open as well, so that throughout the semester, students can always go back to the old material. They just can't move forward any faster than the course. And then there's some people that open everything up all at one time. There's some of them that open half at once and then half at the other half. So everything up until the midterms becomes available at one time, and then after midterms, everything else becomes available. So you always have different ways of how you want to open things, close things, when you want to have things due. You can do all sorts of things within WT Class. So that's part of what that course plan is for. What are you going to have available? When are you going to have available? When is it going to be due? Do you have a module, a lesson, a unit, a chapter? What kind of a title do you have for it? It really doesn't matter what it's titled. It's completely up to you. Do you have learning objectives? What are students going to be able to know and be able to learn by the end of each one of those structured lessons, units, modules, whatever you want to call it? The lesson topics. Identify which objective kind of fills back into those different things. It helps, again, those students that need to know, why am I reading this article, if they know exactly what that relates to. back to those course objectives or even learning and module objectives. Description of your assessment items, quizzes, exams, tests, assignments, discussions. Are you giving information on what they're supposed to do, why they're supposed to do it, how they're supposed to do it, where to get help, all those different things. The more information, the better, really and truly. And are you thinking through all those different components? And then you may even want to include what grade category these different assessment items go into. That way, whenever you start looking at building your grade book, you already have that structured, and you're able to look at it and say, well, I have 20 assignments, but I only have one homework. Maybe I need to restructure how my assignments are and turn them into my homework, and be able to look at those different things right there as you're planning out your course. What are you going to have students read? What are you going to have students watch? All of that, looking through those course plans and planning out all of those things. So with that, a lot of people start to say, okay, now how do I structure this? So here's just a couple of kind of examples of the most common ways. So of course we have, weeks, week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 16. You can do the same things with chapters or units where it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Or you have individual chapters. They're going to learn chapter 6, this one, and chapter 12. And all of those different kinds of ways you can easily structure them. Then you have kind of some of the combination of things. You have the modules, but inside of each module you have multiple chapters that are going to be working together. Or the really big combination is where you have all the lecture materials in one folder, all the assignments in one folder, all the discussions in one folder, and maybe a group project. You have everything sorted out by type. Now, for most classes, this is not my recommendation. And like I said, not for most. There are classes that fit very well into this, and this is very understandable. But my analogy for this is, if you go to the grocery store and now you're going down every aisle each week, I have to go to the lecture materials aisle and find my lecture materials for this week. Now I have to go to the assignments aisle and find my assignments for this week. And now I have to go to the discussions aisle and find my discussions for this week. And I'm going through each one of these aisles. Well, it's a lot handier if I do that grocery pickup where I show up and everything I need for this week is in one nice little bundle, one nice little bag. I can just pick up that bag and go. So it's looking at how are you structuring your course, and does it make more sense to move into one of those week or unit kind of situations or module situations where students have one area that they can say, okay, did I do everything that's due this week? Because I can see all of that from one page. Because again, students don't go back to the syllabus after that very first class day. So we don't want to keep sending them back to figure out, okay, you need to do these lectures, you need to do this assignment, but this week not a discussion, but next week you're going to do a discussion. So helping to provide that information and clarity to students so they're not searching all over the store for different items. None of them is better than any others. It really just depends on what works for your class. I want to mention I am doing a structuring your online course, kind of a course structure, course organization workshop in, I think it's 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks from Thursday, that will talk about this and kind of look at some examples of what faculty are doing and really talk about why one way might work good for their course or why it might not work or what a better option is or a different option. And so we're going to be looking at some of these and how do you structure courses. So if you're interested in that, if you need help with that, that's a good workshop to look at coming to. All right, so when you're looking at, so transitioning from the course plan and looking at what's in your course menu, I like to mention you can always edit that course menu. The default setup is just a default kind of blanket way of doing things that we kind of mimicked from when we moved from Angel, but you can always make edits from that. But the big thing we always stress and always recommend is keeping it simple. You don't want this overly long course menu because then it becomes way more stuff that they're having to look through. But also thinking about how many clicks are you making students make? Do they click on lessons? Do they click on Unit 1? Do they click on Chapter 1? Do they click on you know, a topic inside of Chapter 1? How many clicks are they having to take to get to things? And are there things that you could reduce by restructuring some things? What is the most important information that you want your students to know? And are you making that embedded deeply, or are you letting them know up front, these are the things you need to do, or these are the things you're going to want to remember, and how are you structuring some of that more important things? And so just looking at that course menu and what is really important, and what do you really want your students to be able to look for and find easily. So just some different things. I want to talk a little bit about how do you add some of those basic kind of content, because we're finding a lot of faculty haven't been using some of these things, so they're a little confused as to what some of these settings are. So let me switch back over here and get back to my, where is it? There it is. I have way too many things up on my computer. Okay. So everyone should be seeing my WT class now. And so I just want to walk you through a little bit of some of the different content kind of things for providing content to your students. This isn't necessarily your assessments, your tests, your assignments, things like that, but just your content specific things. And so all of those become under the build content inside of here. And so we have an item, which is basically I'm going to add text to the page and my students can then see it right there inside of WT class. I can add a file which allows students to download a Word document, PowerPoint, PDF, whatever kind of file it is that they can download to their computer to be able to open. I like to mention you have this audio, image, and video area. I rarely recommend any of these because for both audio and video, we actually recommend you putting it in like Ensemble Video. It's our streaming media server. It's similar to like YouTube. It's just WT's controlled kind of version of it. But by adding it into there, it helps save space in WT class because not only if I use this class this semester and I have 2 sections of it, well now that same video or that same audio file is now in both courses whenever I add it in. And so it's in there twice. If I copy this course to 2 sections next semester, now it's in 4 sections. Now it's in this system 4 times. Where when you put it in Ensemble, you link to all 4 of those courses, but we are only housing one version of that audio or video file. Additionally, we have some students that have issues with like internet speeds and stuff like that. And so sometimes the audio and video components inside of WT class make it very difficult for students to download and watch those things. Where in Ensemble, they tend to have easier because it is streaming. They get short little snippets that are downloaded to their computer at a time versus having to download the entire video or audio. We also have a limit for the amount and the size for uploading into WT class. A lot of videos quickly run over that. So you do have to be aware of those kind of limitations to it as well. So you just have to watch out for some of those different things. And then image, typically when people are adding an image into WT class, this isn't going to produce the image. This isn't how like I added that banner into that example course. I didn't add it through this. It doesn't really look the way you typically are expecting it to. So I don't know a lot of people that like the result whenever they do the image option. There's other ways to do it. So in general, these are not ways that people add things simply because they're not going to produce what they're expecting to get out of them. You can do a web link, so you can actually link to outside websites. This learning module, that's what I mentioned where there was a folder versus a learning module. Here's the learning module. Notice up here is content folder. These I'm going to kind of skip because they're very specific to specific things. And then I also like to mention a module page. A lot of faculty see module page and they're using learning module and they think, oh, that must be a module page. You must go inside of a learning module. That's not what it is. A module page is actually what the home page is. Whenever you come to the home page, this is a module page. So you add in these different modules, these different boxes. So you're usually not wanting a module page. I don't know anyone that actually uses module pages inside their class other than like the syllabus tab, the homepage tab. And then blank page, this is exactly like an item. It just kind of looks a little bit differently. Do students click on a link to open up the text, or does it just display it outwardly on the page? So I'm going to go into item just so you kind of have an idea of kind of the main settings. Pretty much everything's going to have a title. What do you want this to be? What do you want to title it? A lot of these items have text that you can add. Not all of them, like a file doesn't have the ability to add text, but most of the other items have the ability to add in text if you want to add that in. Attachments, you can add in attachments to different things. And then the 3 common things that every single one of these different items has is our standard options down here. Permit users to view this content. This, yes, they can view it. No, they can't view it. I also like to call this the power to the building, because if you have this set to no, even though you have display after and display until dates, it still doesn't make it available. So the display after and display until dates become the power within a room, the light switch within a room. Well, if the power's off to the building, it doesn't matter if you turn on the switch within a room, there's no power, you can't get light. So from this, as long as yes is selected, you can then make things magically appear or magically disappear on dates. This helps prevent you from having to say, okay, my content is going to be available Monday at 8 a.m. I got to be sitting at my desk at a computer ready to go Monday at 8 a.m. to make sure and turn it on. You can actually set it up where it just magically does that for you. I also like to point out in these display until, there is an end of day. This is 11:59 p.m. So essentially it is midnight without actually saying midnight. Because if you actually put in midnight, you're actually putting it in as the next day. And sometimes, especially with like things that are due, assignments and tests and things like that, students may find a page that says, well, it's due on Thursday. Well, it's due on Thursday at the very beginning of the day, not Wednesday night at midnight. And so they come back and thinking, I still have an entire other day, but now they've missed it because they come in that last day. So we always recommend, if you are saying it's due at midnight, put it at this end of day, because that is really, they may lose like, 0.1 second of the day, but really, is that really enough to hurry somebody out of that? And then this other setting that's in between these, the track number of students, this will actually let you set up or will create a report that can be ran on this particular item to see who all has accessed it, to see who all has clicked on it and stuff like that. So you have that ability. There's other tracking mechanisms that are available. So this doesn't necessarily prevent all tracking mechanisms. Sorry, I can't, that's in my way. So it's not preventing all tracking, all reports. It just allows me to look at one report and say, okay, here's everyone in my class who accessed it. Where there's another report that I can run that says, okay, this student, what did this student access? And those are basically the main differences between those kind of 2 different tracking reports. All right, so like I said, those last 3 options are in all of these different things. I'm not going to necessarily go over each one of these items. I just like to talk about what all are available and kind of a lot of the common features and tools within each one of those. So, all right, let me switch back over here. There are additional trainings that we are doing. Right now, we are not doing assignments, tests, and discussions as far as June is concerned. We'll probably have some more before the end of the summer. I know some for sure we'll have before the end of the summer. And so if you're interested in any of those, please feel free to sign up for those additional trainings. If you didn't sign up for any of the additional ones that we're doing in June, feel free to do that as well. If you need that link, please let me know, and I can happily send that back out to anyone who needs it. We also always have one-on-ones. So if you're interested in connecting with any one of us through one-on-one, I need help with a course plan. I'm not quite sure what the best structure is. I'm not quite sure if I have everything I need, if I'm missing anything, is there really blatantly something kind of missing? Talk to us. We have lots of different ways that you can contact us. And so here's kind of all of our different ways you can contact us. I will send out an email later on, either today or tomorrow morning, with a follow-up, basically a survey for how this training was, as well as our contact information and stuff like that. And then if you need help, how to get a hold of any one of us. So I just want to make sure everyone has kind of what they need, gets the help that they need through all of it. And so if you have any questions, I hadn't been seeing anything pop up in the chat. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to let us know. I wanted to give everybody a couple minutes at the end in case there was anybody that did have any questions that I could bring up with everyone. Otherwise, if no one has any questions, that is all that I have for you today. Thanks for coming. Like I said, I really just wanted to talk about kind of some of the differences from moving online to moving remotely, and kind of how can you help to be prepared for an online class going forward. A lot of people say, wow, this is really overwhelming. But what ends up happening is you spend a lot of time up front so that when you're in the middle of your online class, you know exactly what you're doing, exactly where you're going, exactly where you've been. It helps to relieve some of that stress, and you can spend more time focusing on how do you do things in the thick of the class, and not so much what am I trying to teach my students. All right, so I haven't seen any questions pop up, so I want to thank everyone once again for coming, and hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their week.